You are listening to Fantha Tracks.
Because of the following special program, Wonder Woman and the Incredible Hulk will not be presented this evening.
It's time to get all your Star Wars news in a single file. This is Making Tracks. Here are your hosts, Mark Newbold and Mark Mulcaster.
That's not true. That's impossible.
You're listening to Making Tracks. I'm your co-host Mark Newbold, and joining me today is a man who, when the Empire was looking for the secret rebel base, he hid it in its case and he put it in the garage. Mark, how you doing?
Hey, yeah, and do you know what? If I could have $1 for every time somebody's tagged me in a post whereby they've shown a photo of like that Millennium Falcon toy base that seems to have done around on social media for like forever, I would be so stinking rich. It would be amazing. With all that plastic, I'm thinking that's not a comfortable instrument to be had in your hands, really, is it?
No, it does look a bit slightly clunky.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Mucklunky, we should say. Mucklunky.
Yes. You know, so how's things with you, dude? How are you?
I'm very well. It's been sweltering hot this week, as it has been all across the UK, so, but not complaining. We shouldn't complain.
No.
It's good weather. It's not bad, but it's been a bit much this week. He said, complaining. But other than that, no, it's been the usual busy Star Wars week. I've actually had some stuff come in the collection this week, so that's been good. Everything is ticking over quite well. How about you?
It's been nice. It's been nice and hot, and I've had lots of time off this week as well. Hit the gym, had a few things as well, but let's talk about your things, because I'm sure your things will be far more interesting than what my things are that I've had into my collection today.
I don't know about that, because I don't know what you've had, but I will tell you, I've had the Goldsboro version, beautiful green version of Rising Storm, which I'm listening to on Audible. I'm 17 chapters in, reading a bit of the book and listening to it on Audible, really enjoying it so far. But I would say I think the most interesting thing I've had this week is a Japanese version of Classic Creatures Return of the Jedi on Laserdisc.
Oh, wow.
So I've gone through a bit of a Japanese Laserdisc kick at the moment. So I picked up Battle for Endor recently. I got the original trilogy on Japanese Laserdisc. I've had Phantom Menace since it came out. Yeah, it's absolutely gorgeous. So anything that's Japanese Laserdisc at the moment is really catching my eye. So my little collection's building nicely. What about yourself? Any little bits turn up this week?
Yeah, so I had my Black Series Gaming Greats Cal Kestis figure arrive.
Oh, nice.
Continuing on with my Power of the Force to rebuy, I picked up Jabba's Dancers.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so a nice little set, a nice minty box that will go in the pile as well.
As they do.
So yeah, I'm kind of enjoying just trawling through that, and to be honest, what's quite nice about those is there's quite a few on eBay and they're not like super expensive. It's not like a big purchase. It'll be nice just to kind of get some of those back. I'm pretty sure I had most of those cinema scenes when they first came out, but where they went or when I sold them, I have no idea. So doesn't exactly match up to Laserdisc, but it's all fun and it's all Star Wars, which is the main, most important thing.
Hi, this is Guy Henry, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks. Enjoy.
There was a High Republic panel featuring all the stars of Project Luminous talking about what we've got to look forward to. It was called We Are the Republic. Let's look at what they talked about, because we're still in phase 1. There's 3 phases. We're in phase 1. Wave 3 of phase 1 has been announced. A lot of it comes in January 2022. And there's some fascinating stuff on the way. Just to describe what we've got coming for wave 3 of phase 1. I can't believe we're still in phase 1.
That's crazy, isn't it?
I think this thing really must be sort of a 3-year project. So the tagline is The Light of the Jedi Goes Dark, and we can look forward to The Fallen Star by Claudia Gray, Eye of the Storm by Charles Soule, Mission to Disaster by Justina Ireland, and Midnight Horizon by Daniel Jose Older. So Fallen Star is an adult novel, the 3rd adult novel in the run. Eye of the Storm by Charles Soule is from Marvel. It's a 2-parter. Mission to Disaster is by Justina Ireland, as I say, Disney Lucasfilm Press, as is Midnight Horizon by Daniel Jose Older. It begins in January 2022. So one of the things that got mentioned, and I want to get your thoughts on this really, is Cavan Scott mentioned that in and amongst the action and what we've got to look forward to, and he hints it, but he kind of says it, a Jedi joins the storm. Now, I read an article this morning that hypothesised, quite correctly I would think, that whoever that is is essentially one of the Lost 20 that we heard first in Attack of the Clones. To me, that was the most tantalising thing that was said.
That's actually quite a nice, interesting tidbit. With the Marvel comic run, they've done a lot of heavy lifting to try and connect the High Republic to the saga as a whole, but not necessarily the other way around. And so actually, if you were to get that, if I suggest a name, I think it might spoil the book, because I know you're still reading it and I've read it.
I am.
So therefore, I'm not too sure if I should...
Okay, yeah. No, that's fair. That's a fair point. And other people will be in the same boat. So, yeah, maybe we shouldn't mention it. But you've got somebody in mind. You think you've got a good sense of who it will be?
Based on, and you'll find out what happens in this book, there's definitely somebody who slips a little bit in this book. So I'm going to add that to our prediction tracker. It's so difficult to speculate without giving anything away. There's a character who dips into the dark side, at least for dark side power, in Rise and Storm. That would be my obvious guess, based on obviously he's just done that, but then also be a little bit too obvious because obviously that's already been kind of set up. But we'll have to see what happens with over the next 6 months or so. Potentially, they could always use it as a way just to plant somebody into an Nihil. So yes, somebody does actually kind of the pretense is that they it's a bit of a ruse. So they make a big song and dance about this Jedi leaving, and he becomes one of the Lost 20, and he's planted in as an undercover spy in the Nihil. So it may actually not necessarily be completely dark, but maybe we're led to believe that he's going to go dark. That would be my take.
Make notes on that one. That's definitely one worth coming back to. Charles Soule's doing a 2-part of Marvel called Eye of the Storm. He's got good form. Obviously, he writes a lot for Marvel. He's writing the main title at the moment. You mentioned mentions of the High Republic in the current timeline, the original trilogy timeline, if you want to call it that. You've got Starlight Squadron, obviously referring to Starlight Beacon, and there are a few mentions, and they're sort of slipping it in there quite tidily. Also, Claudia Gray will be penning the 3rd adult novel. That's The Fallen Star, so that's going to keep that nice run on. It does feel like everybody's getting a go at an adult novel as well, which is good.
I know you're listening to the audiobook, but I have to say, a huge shout out to Mark Thompson, who does the voices and the narration for Rise of Storm. There's some really intense dialogue in this, and it's kind of like, oh my God, if I could have give him a standing ovation whilst I'm driving in my car, I probably would have. Compared to where audio novels were for Star Wars 10, 15 years ago, or even like earlier, back in the mid-90s with the abridged ones that Anthony Hill used to narrate, this is just like a completely different beast entirely, and it's great because I think they've realised that actually audiobooks isn't just for the lazy, and it's not necessarily just for those who are visually impaired. People and the world in which we live in makes it quite difficult to kind of just sit down and read a whole novel in a condensed period of time. I mean, I probably would still be on Light of a Jedi if I was only reading it, just because of how little time I think we have in our lives these days to do such things. So yes, so big shout out to Mark really for that one, I think.
I'm Gareth Edwards, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks Radio.
So, Galactic Starcruiser docks at Disney World Resort in 2022. Can't wait to see what they've got inside that building and what we can look forward to. But they have released the official poster. It's a classic Star Wars style layout. You've got Kylo Ren at the top. You've got the Halcyon to the left. There's Chewie to the right, and a gaggle of characters in the centre. A very fancy looking astromech at the bottom, and just a sense of what we look forward to. Obviously, there's a dining experience in a restaurant called the Crown of Corellia dining room. What do you make of this? Because it does feel like something that's going to cost an arm and a leg. I don't have any arms and legs to spare. I'm not saying for Beeblebrox, but what do you think people are going to make of this? Because that is a great teaser for something that's coming next year.
I tell you what, it really reminds me of the Old Republic, as in the role-playing computer game. I think it's that green-skinned Twi'lek with, I guess, is holding a holocron or some description. You've got enough kind of stuff there to kind of really, I think, kind of show that it's not just for the geeks, it's really for the kids and for the family, because you've got the 2 kids who are waving lightsabers, and you've got a very Jyn Erso looking spy or some kind of operative. It's fascinating. I really can't wait to see what people think of it. I mean, because from what we've seen, it looks amazing. It kind of has that kind of Camino-esque Jango Fett apartment kind of vibe about it in some ways. So I wonder if they're going to be able to knock the price down a bit after a couple of years or something, because it is quite restrictive, isn't it, in terms of how accessible and how many people could actually really afford that for a family of, say, 4 or 5.
Yeah.
To be fair, it is, you stay there for just only a couple of days or a couple of nights, so it's not like you'd be booking out for a 2-week stay in Orlando. You'd have to make it part of your stay when you go there.
It looks amazing. There's as I mentioned, there's the Corona Corellia dining room, which is like the supper club. Food and drinks, obviously, in there. You just mentioned the lightsaber moment. There's a lightsaber training where you face off with a remote. You would assume there's going to be First Order stormtroopers everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
You're basically heading to Galaxy's Edge, so there's that whole aspect of it. But yeah, just to throw that poster out right now is a good move. I think it's keeping it in people's minds. Yes, like you say, you'd like to think over the next couple of years they either expand it and build more rooms if it's a success, which I can't see it not being a success. There's always people with the money to do it.
Yeah.
You'd like to think at some point there's alternate options that maybe you're not paying the top whack. There's a slightly lower level. I don't suppose they would need to drop the prices. I think they'll always sell these rooms.
Yeah.
But if you're in Florida for 2 weeks and you think, done my package deal, I've got my car, I've got my hotel, it's sorted out for 2 weeks and that's what we've paid, and you just want to spend a night, or I think it's minimum of 2, so you want to spend 2 nights at Galactic Starcruiser, you just leave all your junk in your hotel room, you pack a bag for 2 nights and just go and lightly travel to this and do this for 2 nights as well. It's a heck of an extra expense, but what an experience. So good news, Galactic Starcruiser, as you say, 2022, but this poster's really turned up the hype dial.
Hi, I'm Simon Paisley Day. I play General Quinn in Star Wars 9. You're listening to Fantha Tracks.
So last week, a GoFundMe was launched to raise money for the family of Jonathan Rinzler. The GoFundMe launched with a lot of sites and podcasts sharing it, trying to get the word out there. They were aiming to raise $50,000. At point of recording, they've currently raised $55,356, smashed through the target, and hopefully that will continue. Just to say, in case anybody's not aware, we spoke to Jonathan last year, didn't we?
Yeah.
For Empire 40. He gave us plenty of his time. For people that don't know, he's written, Making a Star Wars Empire and Jedi, Making a Revenge of the Sith prior to that, Essential Complete Making of Indiana Jones. He's also done books on Making of Alien, Making of Planet of the Apes, his own novels. He's a busy guy that's an integral part of Star Wars history, really, isn't he? The stuff that he's done and researched is critical to people who want to learn about how Star Wars was made.
Yeah, I mean, when I shared this on the Rebel Legion's Facebook page the other day, I think I basically said that his Star Wars making-of books is basically essential reading. Books that every Star Wars fan should have on their coffee table or in their bookcase if they've got shelves big enough. The original trilogy books that he researched about, beyond thorough. And also, actually, ironically, I think he said in the interview that we did with him, there's still more in there. But everybody here at Fantha Tracks and Making Tracks, our thoughts go out to Jonathan and his family.
I'm Neil deGrasse Tyson, and you are following Fantha Tracks.
This week on Disney Plus, Behind the Attraction Landed. It's a 5-episode series produced by none other than Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, believe it or not, that looks at the behind the scenes of a lot of the major attractions at the Disney parks. The episodes cover Jungle Cruise, Haunted Mansion, Tower of Terror, Space Mountain, but the 3rd episode focuses on Star Tours and Galaxy's Edge. I've watched it. It was fantastic, really interesting. There's a lovely tone to the narration. Paget Brewster does the narration. Yeah. There's a really cool tone to it that's very bouncy. It's great fun. But the one thing that I found fascinating from the Star Tours episode that also halfway through sort of merges into Galaxy's Edge, it really is covering Star Wars in the park, is the reveal that George Lucas came up with the idea of the secret rebel spy when they redid Star Tours back in 2011. Had you heard that before? Because I'd never heard that Lucas just came up with this cool idea.
No, I didn't. And unfortunately, I haven't had the chance yet to sit through the Star Tours episode, but the episodes we've seen have been great. They're full of information, and as you said, like Paget does a really great bubbly voiceover for a narration, which compared to her role in Criminal Minds is something completely different. So it's a fantastic idea, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
Picking somebody out and just making them a spy, Matt. So I'm not surprised it's come from George. I'm sure there's probably other bits and bobs he kind of threw in there, which is also kind of equally as important. But have you ever been a rebel spy?
I have. I have. Only once, though. I mean, I've probably done Star Tours 25 times, confidently, probably more, to be fair. Because I did Disneyland Paris, done Orlando back in 93, so I did the original Star Tours, Florida a couple of times since. So every chance, if we're walking past and there's a gap in the queue, we just go in and do it.
Yeah.
Every time I went, never did Hoth, never managed to get to do Hoth. And then all of a sudden, every time we went, there was Hoth. But yeah, one time I was the rebel spy, so I had to buy the T-shirt like you do. But yeah, it's a great idea. And as a show, it's fantastic because, like you say, you've got the Imagineers, but then you've also got Lucasfilm guys from back in the day who were working on the original Star Tours and trying to work out how they did it. Guys like Dennis Muren are in there. And then you come up to the more recent stuff with Galaxy's Edge. and the people who've worked on that, which is obviously, given that Lucasfilm's now part of Disney, is more of a tighter collaboration in that sense. Really good show. It feels a bit like the toys that made us and the films that made us. It feels like a show that will more than likely get a second season, because who wouldn't want to know about the making of Pirates of the Caribbean or Splash Mountain or, the other big attractions at Disney? It's fascinating.
Hey man, it's me, Kevin Smith, Star Wars fan, Fantha Tracks fan.
So this week, StarWars.com had some more Hasbro toy reveals, and first up, they revealed a lovely set of 6 Star Wars Clone Wars, the micro series, vintage collection 3 3/4-inch figures. So then on the newly designed the Clone Wars vintage collection card backs with the 50th anniversary Lucasfilm logo, where you've got a nice selection of both clone troopers and Jedi. So in this wave, we've got Ayla Secura, Luminara Unduli, Bao Sophie, an ARC Trooper Captain, an ARC Trooper, and a Battle Droid. So they all join the vintage collection, and these will be released at the end of the year, I believe in December. Mr. Newbold, have you seen these? Are you going to pick any of these up?
I have seen them. I've ordered the ARC Trooper Captain and the ARC Trooper. I thought, I'll just get the Troopers because I think they look cool. And now I'm looking at it thinking, I'm probably going to order the other 4 and just get the whole wave, because I didn't anticipate this coming out at all. I don't think anybody did. And they look fantastic on the card. They really look fantastic. And the more love that micro series gets, the better, really. It's such a great show for its time. I think they also announced that there's 3 Black Series figures as well, ARC Trooper, Mace Windu and General Grievous. But I don't think they've released images for those yet, just sort of placeholder pictures. So there will be Black Series Clone Wars figures as well, which will be very interesting to see when they come out.
And also Stars.com announced that coming some point at the end of spring 2022 will be a trio of carbonized Black Series figures from The Mandalorian. So we have got a Scout Trooper, Paz Vizsla, and also we've got a Shore Trooper. The Shore Trooper looks like that gold clone trooper from Resistance.
Cardinal? Was it Cardinal?
Something like that, yeah. I think it's just obviously how the Scarif Trooper, which is normally like a cream colour, it's just how it's been rendered with the kind of carbonised paint job. So, I mean, these are pretty cool. They're in the Black Series packaging and stuff. Are you going to pick these up? What do you kind of really think about the carbonised series as a whole?
I like them. I mean, I really love the carbonised Fett and the carbonised Mando. I thought they were fantastic. But there were some other really nicely done carbon. I think did the Sith Trooper. There's been some nice stuff. I love the Shore Trooper design. It's probably my favourite armour. Biker Scout, you can't lose with the Biker Scout. It just looks so good. And Paz Vizsla again. I've got the deluxe Paz Vizsla anyway. But looking at this now, that armour really does shine with the carbonised effect on it. So looking at these now, if I only pick one, I'd pick the Shore Trooper. But to be honest, I'm kind of tempted by all 3.
I do find that the carbonised paint application works pretty well with the Mando figures. I mean, especially Mandalorian when he's wearing the best guys. It kind of sells itself, really. I mean, I do quite like the Biker Scout. It's got some nice articulation there. The problem is for these figures, of course, is the fact that at the moment, these appear to only be a Target exclusive. So that's obviously great if you're in the States, not so great if you're in the UK. So hopefully these will make their way via the fan channels and online stores to the UK shores in the near future.
Hello, I'm Ahmed Best, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
Every single crew member, you look in their eyes, and it's like a kid going, I grew up watching Star Wars. Like, this is my dream to be here. Like, to see one of the, Star Wars character, a Darth Vader character, or, one of the Jedis walk around. It's like, no matter how old they are, it's like guys that do my makeup and stuff, and people who do the costumes, do all the set designers. There's this feeling of legacy. And it's like, everyone talks about history and, why they feel so blessed to be here, right? And so there's this history. There's this kind of shared spirit and this passion of why we wanted to come into Hollywood. And, the connective tissue is all these Star Wars characters.
We know that actor Sung Kang, best known as Han Solo in the Fast and Furious franchise, is part of the Obi-Wan Kenobi cast. But speaking to Rotten Tomatoes, he gave away some very interesting tidbits. He mentions that there are Jedi, or Jedis, as he says, slap on the wrist, on set.
I knew you were going to pick him up on that.
Couldn't help it. And he also mentions seeing Darth Vader. Now, we know Hayden Christensen's in the show as Darth Vader, but mentioning Jedi as, in addition to Obi-Wan, is very interesting. I think we both assume that there will be flashbacks. What are your thoughts on what he said? He's clearly excited. He mentions the cast and crew are excited. There's a real buzz on set. That's very evident. But mentioning other Jedis, and mentioning Darth Vader tends to give you the sense that it's expanding upon, this isn't just Ben kicking around on the sandy planet of Tatooine. There's more to it than that.
That's what kind of caught my eye. I guess what you've got the potential with Hayden Christensen is the fact that you could flash back to him as Anakin Skywalker, and so you can kind of have maybe a little bit of elaboration between his relationship to Obi-Wan Kenobi to maybe strengthen some kind of showdown when he's Darth Vader at the end of the series, for instance. There's kind of rumours and stuff like that, flying around about, but actually, there's going to be Kenobi versus Vader, as the kind of the climax to this miniseries. So that would be interesting. And I suppose it kind of makes sense because when you think about it, me and and most Star Wars fans and even, relatively casual Star Wars fans will know that Obi-Wan Kenobi trained Anakin Skywalker if they've seen the prequels. But they've got to kind of tick all the boxes. And what would be better, rather than just having a little bit of dialogue, why didn't we show it? So let's see some Jedi. We might even see additional scenes of Order 66. We could see Anakin mowing down more Jedi, for all we know. It does offer an interesting perspective that we could get now with this, and I'm really excited for it. I mean, obviously, the whole thing has the potential to be epic anyway. I think this is going to help to ramp it up. But there's also, I guess, a potential because of the time frame, 10 years before A New Hope, and because of what we saw with Star Wars Rebels, we might even see some Inquisitors and stuff like that. Could you imagine, if Obi-Wan's on Tatooine and he first has to avoid, and I wouldn't say take down Inquisitors, because I think if you were to take down an Inquisitor, that's immediately going to turn the attention to Vader. But if he has to just kind of avoid them and make sure that, he's not discovered, that would make it interesting.
I wonder, though, with this show, in the same way that the Bad Batch, we assumed the Bad Batch was always going to be like A-team style stuff, and we kind of had our ideas, all of us, not just you and me, but all the fandom, of what the Bad Batch would be. And I think it's safe to say the Bad Batch has ended up being a lot more than we thought it would be, to the point that now the world-building aspect, which is as important as the story of the Batch, has got almost equal billing. We're seeing that era get defined. I wonder whether Kenobi will be the same. Will it all just focus on Obi-Wan and what he's doing? Or will we skip to Alderaan and see that young Leia that's been mentioned recently? Will Jimmy Smits be in it? Are we going to see other parts of the galaxy? We've got Vader in it. It's midpoint between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope. We've got a Vader who's now entrenched in his work with the Emperor. Could we see Ian McDiarmid in this show? We've got a technology now where you're very lucky. Becca Benjamin shared the picture on Twitter recently of Hayden just out and about. He's clearly been working out. He looks like he did 20 years ago. It's freakish and slightly annoying how well he's preserved himself. And Ewan's the same. I mean, Ewan really doesn't look that different to how he did when Sith was made. Certainly to the degree that if they want to use a bit of technology to knock a couple of those crow's feet off, which we all get when you hit 50, they could do it. It's minimal compared to some of the work they've had to do. Imagine what they're going to have to do with Harrison Ford if they want to make him look like he did in the 50s. Very interesting to think that they've got the scope to go back to the Clone Wars and do extra scenes, to have sequences with Vader now midpoint between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope, and show him with the Emperor. They can get McDiarmid to look basically like he did when Jedi came out. The potential is huge, and Sung Kang mentioning, again, Jedis, it just screams Clone Wars, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. So with all this kind of stuff and potential, Kenobi meeting Vader and everything else that we might get, are you even remotely concerned that this could potentially undo a certain level of impact that A New Hope had? Or do you think this is, if done right, this is just going to heighten it?
That's a great question, because I was thinking of this before. I'd have to go back and listen to it to remember exactly the way it was worded. I think the inference, and it is inference, which is that's the big gap they can chase now. The inference was always that Ben and Vader fighting on the Death Star in A New Hope was the first time they clashed since they clashed on Mustafar. But I think if you look at the way it's developed over the years, I think you could conceivably drop in another clash if that's what you wanted to do. Between Mustafar and now, you just think, this is the first time they've come face to face. Are they going to do a Wrath of Khan? Khan and Kirk never meet up face to face. It's all at distance. Is it a clash like that? Or could you work it so that they do physically interact once again and Ben gets the upper hand still? If Ben's 50 at this point, which is kind of the way they're playing it, that he could go toe-to-toe with his former apprentice and give him a good fight. Season 1 of Obi-Wan Kenobi does great business. Could they do another clash 4 or 5 years later? We meet once again, old man. Second time round, maybe Ben barely escapes with his life. I don't know. I'm spitballing, but I think they could contrive it so that it fits and it doesn't contradict, because that would be awful. If they screwed up that massive moment in A New Hope, And I know Star Wars, the original Star Wars, kind of is dropping down the ranks of most important films now, just because it was the first. A lot of fans now rank their favourite Star Wars films, and A New Hope's like 8 or 9 now. Still number 2 for me. I think you've got to honour those moments, and of all the films to not contradict and not disrespect in terms of story, it's A New Hope. That's the one that you don't want to contradict. So I think if they could work it and make a clash fit within the confines of what happened in Sith, what happens in A New Hope, they can have a clash in this one.
Okay, so I think it's possible it could work. The more that you kind of stretch it out, the more contrived it will feel. I think you could get away with it once, but maybe twice, maybe not so much. I mean, I suppose a 10-year gap, that's a fair distance amount of time. So all that dialogue, that still kind of works. But I think the more time is spent together, there's a risk it doesn't quite necessarily line up with A New Hope. But at the same time, then you kind of think, wow, when Vader does actually strike down Kenobi, how much more does that mean? There's two sides to that. If actually the dramatic irony is that Vader thinks he's finally gotten, one over on Kenobi and he's killed him. But we know now that Ben's more powerful than ever. There's even more kind of emphasis on that.
What you mean? If the scene in A New Hope suddenly becomes like the best of 3?
Yeah, exactly.
Ben got the upper hand. He got the higher ground in Sith. In A New Hope, he knows he's kind of outpowered, but he's basically just holding him up so Luke can escape and then sacrifices himself. But in the second tie, Ben really does get the better of him.
Exactly, something like that. A New Hope is, I think, probably still number 1 for me. And so, therefore, people like me will see anything that kind of slightly alters A New Hope or the perception of A New Hope could backfire. At the same time, and this is where the interesting world that we now live in, we've got Star Wars that wants to proceed, but at the same time, it has to honour and it has to respect stuff that happened 40-odd years ago. And so it's really difficult.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they've probably agonised over that when they're kind of like in the writing rooms and stuff. Like you said, it could be a Khan and Kirk situation, and actually Obi-Wan and Vader never meet in this series. They're constantly clashing against each other. For instance, Kenobi could be doing a lot of stuff to foil Vader's plans without Vader knowing, for instance. So there's different ways that they could work it. So actually maybe they could do it like that and they don't meet. But I think, we're expecting, and I think everybody will be quite eager for some kind of showdown, even if it's quite brief, to happen in this series.
For everything in one location, daily news, reviews, interviews, podcasts, video, and social media feeds, bookmark FanthaTracks.com for Star Wars news 24/7, 365.
Episode 13 of the debut season of The Bad Batch landed on Friday. The episode was called Infested, and it pitched our sextuplet of clones. That's fancy talk for 6.
It is.
Of clones against the grim-looking giant bug creatures that live underneath Ord Mantell. I found it fascinating. I thought it was a really good episode with some nice character stuff, especially based around Sid and her relationship to the Batch. It is fairly linear for a Star Wars The Bad Batch episode, and it is, in that sense, cookie-cutter Star Wars. But I enjoyed it. What did you make of it, Mark?
Yeah, it was all right. If anything, this episode felt like this could be setting up something that we might get in the back end of season 1, or maybe if the series gets picked up for second season, maybe in season 2. I really liked how Sid has, as a character, transitioned from almost like the Watto-style boss to being a really kind of likeable character that actually has some empathy for the whole crew, especially Omega. I thought that was quite nice to actually have her front and centre. So this, if anything, this might be the Sid cameo episode. I guess if we're going by what the rest of the Bad Batch episodes seem to have been doing recently, where each week there's like a cameo from a different character, this could be her episode. I quite like the stuff underneath it in the caverns, and there was a nice, at least I thought anyway, a nice little nod to Lord of the Rings when Wrecker kind of drops his kind of torch, and I just thought, oh, you fool of a took.
How Sid didn't say fool of a took is beyond me, but there you go. Yeah.
Exactly. And I suppose you could always say there's whenever there's a kind of a minecart scene, your mind almost goes back to Indiana Jones and Temple of Doom. So yeah, I mean, it was a fun episode. It never really felt like a huge amount of peril. When they went back to get the spice after they dropped it, I was like, is this the point where the story ends? This is going to kind of run into a second episode or something. But no, they kind of picked it up, and it didn't really feel like they were ever in too much jeopardy. I wasn't massively huge on Roland Durand. I didn't really particularly think he was a nasty kind of crime boss or anything like that. I mean, obviously it's great to see the Pikes, and the Pikes, I guess that's the big kind of takeaway from this episode. Did you have any bugbears with it?
In terms of like any sort of sci-fi action show, it was a bit Starship Troopers, like you say. It was a bit Aliens. It certainly had that Lord of the Rings mention from the Mines of Moria. You know, there was little elements that they pulled in Temple of Doom, as you said. I think Bad Batch is in a good place in the sense that it can have a fairly straightforward, simple plot, but it gets by because the characterizations are so good, and you're learning stuff about characters that increasingly week on week you care more about them, like Sid. It's always been that Sid just had these guys around because they bumbled into her cantina and it suited them all to do this mission because they needed the money and yada yada. And now Omega's paid off the debt. Really, Sid could easily say, guys, you can go and see the galaxy, you know, whatever. And they could do exactly the same. They're free agents, but they're still working together. So I think it's become a partnership rather than what it was before. So I enjoy that. You know, and Sid's a fairly straight talker. But now she's obviously giving them all nicknames. You don't give people nicknames if you don't care about them. The only one that hasn't got a nickname is Echo. I think Flathead, because you look at his hand and it's a flathead screwdriver, isn't it? They've all got these nicknames. They've all got a relationship with her now. And she's the one that's in trouble. You know, she's lost the bar. They come back and they're like, who are all these guys? What's going on here? Walk to go in the bar and they're stopped. That worked well. It was fine. Rolander didn't mind. It was a bit of he was like a wannabe gangster, like Toro Calican was a wannabe gunslinger sort of thing. He was way out of his league. And Roland realised that really quick, which I kind of liked. He mentions his family and he's basically from a crime. You know, you make criminal sound so dirty, sort of that whole thing he says with Omega. But he's definitely out of his depth, you know, and having the horn cut off. I mean, I thought the Pikes was just going to do him. I really did. But I think part of that is Hunter doesn't want Omega to be around all that death. I think Hunter wants her to see that we're not out here just killing people willy-nilly. We're stunning them. We can do what we need to do. We can get away. They can carry on with their lives. We never have to see them again. They're not going around killing. You can justify it however you want. We do look at 20 stormtroopers get shot by Han Solo and you think nothing of it. Oh, isn't Han Solo cool? But nevertheless, they've got a 10-year-old kid with them. So I kind of get the logic of them not wanting to do that. It's also a Disney show, so you've got to fold that in as well.
Exactly,
you've got to factor in that they don't want to be showing death and destruction all the time.
I think what they're really doing in this episode, I think probably the only main big takeaway I got was trying to reinforce like Omega's purity of spirit. She's kind of got that slight naivety, kiddie, there's good in everybody kind of aspect. But I think it kind of works in this. It didn't felt like it was too forced, and her kind of stepping up just to try and prevent them from killing the dude was quite a nice, strong piece. And my problem is that at the end of last week's episode, we see Crosshair given his mandate, but he can now basically go and just rip through the galaxy and hunt them down. And there's been some passage of time into this episode because at first I thought they were coming off of the mission from Ryloth. But it turns out they've been to another mission because they kind of reference Gundarks and stuff, which is always a great kind of throwaway line. If, you always know that things have gone tits up if you get snarled up with like a load of Gundarks. So there's been a passage of time. So I was expecting, bearing in mind also that we've only got 3 or 4 episodes left, that we would start to see Crosshair maybe tighten the screw a little bit on them. I mean, maybe this is the reason for this episode. It's kind of felt like actually they're not even thinking about Crosshair. They're not even aware of him actually being out there, hunting them down. So maybe this was like the calm before the storm or something.
It's another episode, though, isn't it, where Omega has stepped in and kind of changed Hunter's mind?
Exactly. That's what I'm saying about her purity, really. Yeah. You could say that is that experience and worldliness that Hunter's had. I mean, he's got a much better idea of what the galaxy's like, but even him has got no real clue, really. I think when all of them could still be taken for a ride pretty quickly, if Sid really wanted to, if she wasn't actually as altruistic or as nice and liked to him as much as she does, I think that she could easily have them, taken over for a barrel. So we've got, what was this, episode 13, so we've got 3 more episodes left. So what would you like to see with this season going forward?
Well, one thing from this episode I think will come to play back, but maybe not in season 1, is I think because Omega was very clear to the Pikes to spare Roland's life, I think they were just going to chop his head off. Even though he's probably not that high up on the totem pole, essentially, of gangsters and such, he's probably well connected. So I think they've kind of made an ally there, or certainly somebody that might look the other way if they need to do something. Even though he was annoyed when they stole the spice back from Sid's office, I think he kind of respected the way they did it.
Yeah.
So I think there's something to be played there. But for these final 3 episodes, it does feel, I mean, I don't know how long the last episode is going to be. The first episode was like 70 minutes, so maybe we get a long season finale. I don't know. Clearly, we want some either continuance or resolution to Crosshair's quest, if you want to call it that. I think Kamino's got to come back into it. Hunter promised Omega she would never go back to Kamino. I think she's going to have to go back to Kamino for some reason. So I think that's going to come into it. It wouldn't surprise me one jot now we know that she's Omega and Boba Fett is Alpha. It wouldn't surprise me if Fett turned up. I don't know where he is in his journey at this point. We saw him in the Clone Wars. Now we're going to be just only a few, maybe a year or two on from when we saw him in the Clone Wars. So now maybe he's 13 or 14. Don't know where he is in terms of, how big he's grown or whatever, because he's grown at a natural pace. He's not accelerated like other clones. That could be interesting. So I think there's possibly some play there. Also, wouldn't it be perfect to bring Boba Fett into the Bad Batch when you've got Book of Boba Fett landed in December?
Well,
kind of makes sense.
It kind of does, doesn't it, in some respects? The question I have is, does Boba know about Omega's existence? Because if he does, as you get older, you kind of start to appreciate your siblings a little bit more. But, as a punk 15 or 14-year-old, he probably doesn't give a toss too much. But then, for instance, how cool would that play if they have to go back to Kamino and Omega's in trouble, and then Fett comes and rescues her, so then get your hands off my sister? Kind of in a similar kind of way to what he did in The Mandalorian.
If this is, Attack of the Clones is 3 years before Revenge of the Sith. So there's that 3-year gap. Omega is, we're guessing she's 10 or 11. That's our guess at her age, isn't it? 10 or 11, there or thereabouts. If she's 10 or 11, then when Attack of the Clones was happening, she was 7 or 8. And she's never left Kamino. Django and Boba lived on Topoka City. They lived in Kamino at the time of Attack of the Clones. Boba and Omega, presumably, have met.
You would think so.
You would think they would have met. We're assuming he doesn't know. Maybe he's perfectly aware. Maybe it's Omega that didn't know. Or Omega doesn't know Boba as Boba. Maybe she just knows him as Al. I don't know. There could be any reason why. Because it's Django that called him Boba.
Exactly, yeah.
Maybe before then, he was just chosen as a clone, wasn't he? My payment is X amount of money, whatever resources, and I want an unaccelerated clone to raise as my own son. So maybe Boba was just one of those millions of clones that was being bred, and they altered whatever they altered. We know that they can do wonderful things on Kamino, And maybe there's every chance that we get a flashback scene to where Omega and Alpha are kids playing like kids play,
Yeah, it could be. And it could even be that actually, the Kaminoans, they just refer to him as Alpha. I think maybe if Boba's going to be included, I wonder if the mileage isn't necessarily with him and Omega. It's just a quick setup, and that's how either he meets Fennec or he's already knows Fennec, and that bookends the whole book of Boba Fett. Because I don't think we're going to necessarily see the end of Fennec in this series.
That's a good spot on Fennec, though, because we've seen Fennec as a 20-year-old or whatever she is in this episode. We're assuming that she might be 200 years old. We don't know. And she's older than Boba.
Yeah.
You kind of watch Bad Batch and you think, well, Boba's the old guy. He's overtaken her in reputation galactically. Even in the galaxy, it's like everyone takes a step back when Fett walks in the room. It gives all the reason to why Fett goes to all the extra mile to fix her when he finds her after Toro Calican, mention him again, does what he does on Tatooine. Why would Fett fix her? The Bad Batch is probably going to explain why there's a connection between the two.
Alrighty then, it looks like we've come to the end of this week's episode, so thank you very much for listening. Keen-eared listeners may have noticed the absence of a listener's question, as it appears we've ripped through all the ones you've sent us, so send us some more. In case you are new to the show and don't know how to get in touch, but would like to drop us a line and either send us a question, thought or theory, Mark has all the info to help you do that.
If you want to be a part of the action and stay updated on all the latest Star Wars news, visit panthertracks.com or check out the free Panther Tracks app through the App Store to follow us on your mobile device. Last week's was brilliant, by the way. You can reach out to us and send in your listeners' question by emailing radio@panthertracks.com. Send in your questions. We love to talk about anything that you want us to talk about, family friendly or not. Comment, like and share on any of our social media feeds @Panthertracks, and be sure to subscribe. Leave a review, preferably a 5-star one, on Amazon Music, Audible, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcatcher or smart speaker of choice. And as always, thanks to James Semple for composing the Panther Tracks intro, Anna O'Brien for our Making Tracks opening music, and Mark Daniel and Vanessa Marshall for our voiceovers. Remember, tune into our weekly Fantha Tracks news show, Good Morning Tatooine, live on Sunday evenings at 9 p.m. UK time, 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific on Facebook and YouTube. That's me done for this episode, I think.
I think so. So thanks for that, buddy. And with respects to next week's episode, Mark has very kindly let me have the week off. So there won't be a regular weekly episode of Making Tracks, but he's going to bring you some highlights from his trip to his first Comic-Con in like 18 months, which I believe is Doncaster Unleashed. So keep an eye out for that when that episode drops on your feeds. I'll be back for the following episode, but until then, thank you all for listening. Stay safe, continue to wear a mask when you're out and about, and get vaccinated. You know it makes sense. And of course, until next time, may the Force be with you. Always.
Coming up next on Fantha Tracks Radio, it's another episode of Making Tracks.